In the grimdark universe of Warhammer 40,000, where darkness swallows the galaxy whole, the first question we should ask is not how strong is the Imperium of man, or which mighty armies defend humanity, but rather, how do ordinary people live inside such an immense empire? This empire spans over 1,000,000 worlds, stretching from the galactic core to its distant fringes. Yet for most humans, daily reality is not the blazing battles between space marines and alien monstrosities, but the dull, brutal, and unrelenting rhythm of life for the nameless masses. Imagine you were born on a hive world. The first sight your newborn eyes would meet is not the blue sky, but the flickering artificial lights that have burned for millennia, glowing weakly through the choking smog. The air you breathe is already poisoned by thousands of factory chimneys. The food you are given is recycled from biological wasteland, tasteless and devoid of nutrition. And even as a child, you would understand one truth: your future is not open, but predetermined either. You become a worker on the endless production lines, a serf, or worse, just another faceless body that will die unnoticed. The Imperium proclaims itself as the sole hope of mankind. Yet for the common citizen, that hope often means nothing more than surviving another day of labor. And if you asked an ordinary man or woman what hope looks like, their answer would not be freedom, or the right to dream or to create. Hope in the Imperium means to keep existing, to keep working, to whisper prayers to the Emperor, and trust that he watches over you, shielding you from threats you will never truly see. In a world where fear is the most common currency, fear of heresy, fear of mutation, fear of invasion, surviving from one day to the next is itself a privilege. The striking truth is that most Imperial citizens have no understanding of the wider galaxy. They are born and die on the same planet, never seeing a real sky, never knowing the stars beyond what the ecclesiarchy preaches. They are told, the Emperor protects. Beyond the Imperium lies only darkness, heresy, and death. And this teaching becomes absolute truth unchallenged, unquestioned. Yet it is precisely this ignorance that keeps the Imperium standing. Countless billions of nameless men and women, each repeating their small, monotonous tasks, form the foundation that sustains great armies and galaxy-spanning wars. A single citizen may never believe they matter, but together they are the blood, the bones, and the breath of the Imperium. Without them, there is no empire. In this opening we will sketch the greater picture: why the Imperium is called humanity's only hope, yet at the same time a living hell for its people. We will walk through the bleak tones, the harsh routine of daily life, ruled by religion and fear, ever-lurking threats, and the deep injustice of a rigid hierarchy. But more importantly, we will trace the smaller stories, the human examples buried within those massive numbers, so we remember that behind trillions of souls lie real individuals, with feelings, with faith, and with pain. So let us begin with a simple question. If one day you awoke to find yourself a citizen of the Imperium, how would you live? Would you submit, becoming just another cog in its vast machinery? Or would you dare resist, knowing the price is certain annihilation? In the Imperium, every choice is shrouded in darkness, but within that darkness lies one undeniable truth. The lives of ordinary citizens are never measured by freedom or happiness, only by the years they have surrendered to the Emperor. The Imperium of man spans over 1,000,000 worlds, yet no two planets are ever truly the same. Each reflects a different aspect of the Imperium. There are worlds packed with billions of people crammed into steel cities, planets of endless farmland feeding the galaxy, and holy sites where every breath is tied to religion. From afar, the Imperium looks like a single vast whole, but within it, daily life is so diverse it is almost unbelievable. These differences decide what kind of life a person will live. As an exhausted laborer, a tireless farmer, or a devotee kneeling before sacred statues. Most of the population lives on hive worlds, planets whose entire surface has been swallowed by concrete, metal, and towering megastructures. These cities are called hives because inside them billions of lives cluster in countless layers, like swarms of insects that never sleep. For the common folk, life on a hive world means congestion, pollution, and scarcity. Sunlight rarely reaches the lower levels where millions dwell in shadows beneath endless factory smoke and sewage. The wealthy and powerful live higher up, with slightly cleaner air, yet still surrounded by the noise of machines. Meanwhile, the vast majority are trapped in a cycle of labor, from birth destined to be factory workers, miners, or servants for those above. A typical day begins with the blare of a work siren, followed by the march into assembly lines. The tasks are dull and draining, but resistance is impossible, for survival depends on the artificial rations the Imperium distributes. To them, the world outside the hive hardly exists. Generations may live and die without ever seeing a real sky, a forest, or a field. All they know are steel walls, stairways, pipes, and days repeating without end. This is the harsh rhythm of life, where people are nothing but cogs within the Imperium's great machine. If hive worlds are symbols of overcrowding, then forge worlds are the heart of production worlds of weapons, war machines, and technology. These planets are controlled by the Adeptus Mechanicus, who worship the machine and treat creation as sacred ritual. Here, commoners are not just workers but technical devotees, trained to live their entire lives beside assembly lines. Unlike hive worlds, forge worlds may have fewer people, but their industry is far more intense. The skies glow red with furnace fires, rivers are replaced by molten metal, and the air is thick with ash. People here grow used to skin stained with oil, lungs scarred by dust, and bodies fitted with crude implants to extend their labor. A child born on a forge world may be given mechanical supports from an early age, as if humans themselves are merely extensions of machines. Their spiritual life is consumed by the cult of the machine. They do not pray as normal believers do, but perform rituals of maintenance, anointing gears with oil, and reciting hymns of operation. To them, production is not labor but holy service. Death in a foundry is often seen as sacrifice, proof of loyalty to the Imperium. For these people, breathing smoke and working until collapse is not a burden, it is destiny, written from the moment they are born. In sharp contrast to hive and forge worlds, agri-worlds are planets almost entirely devoted to farming. They provide the grain, vegetables, and meat that feed countless worlds unable to sustain themselves. Life here is open and under the sky, yet it is no less harsh. An agri-world may stretch with fields for hundreds of thousands of hectares, reaching the horizon. Colossal farming machines work day and night, with endless columns of workers moving like ants to sow, harvest, and sort. The people here may see the true sky, but rarely venture beyond their own fields. Their lives are bound to soil, seasons, and strict quotas set by the Imperium. Harshness comes from both nature and rule. A single failed harvest can doom millions to hunger, yet the Imperium seldom lowers its demands. Often farmers must hand over nearly all they produce, keeping only scraps to survive. Thus, even though agri-worlds look brighter, their people are no happier. They are caught in a cycle, planting, tending, harvesting, surrendering, repeated until death. Shrine worlds are the opposite. Planets entirely devoted to worship of the Emperor. Their surfaces may be covered in vast cathedrals, statues, towers, and plazas where millions of pilgrims gather. Life here revolves around ritual and holy law. A day begins with the ringing of bells, followed by labor in sacred sites, and ends with communal chanting. For them, worship is not a choice but a sacred duty. Even simple tasks like sweeping floors or cooking for priests are acts of devotion. People rarely question the meaning of their lives. They grow up breathing faith itself. One might spend an entire lifetime tending a single eternal flame and call it glory. Yet behind this glow lies cruelty. To insult faith is to invite execution. Pilgrimage seasons may see millions die of hunger or trampling, but authorities deem it a worthy sacrifice. For commoners here, dreams of wealth do not exist. The only hope is to die in faith, so their soul may join the Emperor's light. If shrine worlds embody devotion, then death worlds embody terror. These are planets where the environment itself wages war on life-poisonous air. Predatory plants, giant beasts, endless storms, they are hells made real. The people who survive here are few, yet their will to live is unmatched. Each day alive is a victory. Children must quickly learn which leaves are safe, which insects carry lethal venom, and how to read the signs of an acid storm. Homes are temporary fortresses, ready to be abandoned when nature turns hostile. Life here is inseparable from death, yet it forges the toughest of humans. Many elite guard regiments come from such worlds, hardened by danger since birth. For commoners, the idea of future is almost meaningless. Their only aim is to endure one more day. Beyond these major worlds, the Imperium also holds countless frontier and primitive planets. Some are newly settled, lacking infrastructure, while others are untouched and tribal. On frontier worlds, people must play many roles: farmer, hunter, smith, and militia, defending against beasts and raiders. Life lacks comfort, but offers space and freedom unknown to hive dwellers. Communities are tight-knit, survival depending on mutual aid. The Imperium still rules, but often only appears to collect taxes or levy soldiers. On feral worlds, the divide is even greater. People live in tribes, knowing nothing of technology or galactic law. To them, the Emperor may be only a myth passed down as legend. Life revolves around hunting, gathering, and tribal war. Yet such worlds produce soldiers of raw instinct, unmatched in endurance and survival. Seen as a whole, it is clear that the common folk of the Imperium share no single life. Everything depends on the planet of their birth. A hive worker may never see a blue sky, while an agri-farmer may never set foot in a city. A shrine devotee may spend life in prayer, while a tribesman on a feral world knows only myths. For all their differences, they share one truth: they live and die in the name of the Imperium, a colossal machine that devours individuals to preserve humanity's survival in a hostile galaxy. For the commoner, hope lies not in changing their fate, but in lasting long enough for their children to keep a place in the stars. To the Imperium, they are nothing but small, nameless links, but links that must hold, so that the great wheel may keep turning. When leaving behind the civilian worlds with their daily labors, another horizon opens for countless souls within the Imperium, the path of the soldier. It is not usually chosen but imposed. In an empire locked in endless war, the conscription of civilians is an unavoidable reality. For many planets, war is not only a rumor carried by sermons or distant news, but a destiny knocking at the door of every family. When a new levy is called, people know their sons and daughters may never return. This is the threshold to the world of the Astra Militarum, the Emperor's Guard, more commonly known as the Imperial Guard. The Astra Militarum is the vast standing army of the Imperium, numbering in the billions and stretched across uncounted battlefronts. Yet behind this scale lies a cruel truth. Most soldiers are simply civilians thrown into uniform after only a few weeks of crude training. They come from farmers, miners, laborers, even from the slums of hive cities. From the day of conscription, their lives change forever. The ragged clothes of work are replaced with coarse uniforms, and hands once used to plows or hammers are forced to grip a lasgun. The standard weapon, weak but sufficient when pressed into the arms of millions at once. For recruits, military training in the Imperium is harsh, but never refined in the modern sense. The aim is not to create elite warriors, but to shape crowds of civilians into cogs that can fire a weapon in the war machine. They are taught to shoot, to march, to obey without hesitation, and above all, never to retreat without orders. Discipline is upheld by the commissars, the political officers. A complaint, a step backward, even a hesitant glance may be punished by a bullet on the spot. The reality of battle is worse still. Facing enemies such as the orcs, tyranids, or the forces of heresy, soldiers of the Astra Militarum rarely live long. They are sent into combat regiment by regiment, sometimes only to serve as living shields for more valuable troops, or to buy time until reinforcements arrive. In the chaos of war, death comes swiftly and without meaning. A storm of gunfire, a single artillery shell, or simply being abandoned when the line collapses. For many citizens of the Imperium, conscription is seen as nothing more than a death sentence delayed. Yet even in this bleakness, small lights exist. Some soldiers discover bonds of brotherhood forged in hardship, and some even take pride in defending their home world from annihilation. On certain worlds where military service is a tradition, as Cadia once was, conscription is seen as both honor and duty. But for most, there is no choice. For them, surviving one more day is already a miracle. Alongside the Astra Militarum stands another force more familiar to the common eye, the Planetary Defense Force, or PDF. These are the local armies of each world, tasked with holding the line until Imperial reinforcements arrive. Unlike the Guard, the PDF is often poorly trained and poorly equipped, with little budget and limited technology. Many fight with outdated weapons, flimsy armor, and vehicles converted from civilian machines. Yet because they fight for their homes, their families, and their land, their resolve is often fierce. Still, among most citizens, the PDF holds little respect. They are seen as second-class soldiers, expected only to endure until the Astra Militarum or even the Adeptus Astartes arrive. Many planets have fallen entirely because their PDF could not withstand invasion. Yet there are legends of local forces that stood fast, defending their world long enough to become heroes before aid arrived. Both the Astra Militarum and the PDF reflect one truth. In the Imperium, the line between civilian and soldier is razor thin. Today a miner, tomorrow a conscript thrown into the ranks as cannon fodder. People know this well, and every recruitment spreads fear across communities. Farewell gatherings are not parades of glory, but funerals in all but name. Parents weeping, wives and children clinging tight, while those departing know well the chance of return is slim. Life in service is no easier off the battlefield. In barracks, soldiers endure constant scarcity. Rations are cheap nutrient packs, tasteless, monotonous, and often cut short. Disease spreads unchecked, medicine is scarce, and only those still fit to fight receive treatment. The badly wounded are often abandoned or dispatched quickly to avoid wasting resources. Recruits learn immediately. In the armies of the Imperium, an individual life means nothing compared to orders. To look at the soldier's life is to see another side of the Imperium. Billions of lives spent as fuel for endless war. If life on Hive worlds or agri-worlds is drained in labor, then the soldier's life is drained in blood and flesh, both alike in one truth. People are tools, never the goal to protect. Most civilians pressed into Imperial service wear the grey uniform of the Astra Militarum or the crude armor of the PDF. But there are rarer paths, ones so grim that few dream of them, or rather, none would wish to. These are the recruitments into the elite and infamous forces, where the cost is even harsher. Among billions, only a fraction, a drop in the ocean of stars, are chosen for the trials of the Adeptus Astartes, the legendary space marines, revered as demigods of war. To outsiders it may seem an honor, but in truth, for most children selected, it is a death sentence wrapped in glory. The process begins in youth, sometimes as early as 12 or 13. Envoys scour entire worlds, seeking the strongest, fiercest, and most promising children. Once taken, families rarely see them again. From that moment a child belongs to another world, one of pain, trial, and near-lethal surgeries. Out of hundreds of candidates, only a few survive. Those who failed gene seed implantation, brutal training, or collapse under the trials are discarded. Most left dead. Some turned into servitors, half-human machines stripped of humanity. For civilians, being chosen may mean escape from mediocrity, but the cost is the burial of their past. Should they succeed, they are no longer human in the old sense, but Astartes warriors of the Imperium, bound to duty and doctrine. They may live longer than a guardsman, but their freedom is gone forever. Others, especially from Forge worlds or tied to the Adeptus Mechanicus, may be turned into skittery. The cybernetic soldiers of the cult of the machine, unlike the Astartes, their transformation is no rebirth in glory, but an erasure of self. Bodies are cut apart and rebuilt with steel and wires. Eyes are replaced with lenses, thoughts overlaid with code. A Scitarius may retain faint shadows of memory, but most are buried beneath programming of the tech priests. They no longer choose. They march as tools, guardians of the Mechanicus's forges. For common folk, this is no honor but technological enslavement. If guardsmen are flesh for the guns, then skittery are machines for the guns. Soldiers who never question, never resist, and never hope beyond death on a cold battlefield. Another path, less spoken of but vital, is conscription into the Imperial Navy, the colossal fleets of the Imperium. In theory, life aboard may sound less grim than fighting on the ground. In truth, it is another hell. Imperial warships stretch for tens of kilometers, carrying millions of crew. Most are conscripted civilians, one condemned to maintain endless shafts of ventilation the size of cities. Another doomed to tighten a single bolt in the engine room for a lifetime. Life is suffocating, cramped, dim, with thin air and disease spreading unchecked. To their officers, crews are numbers, expendable at will. Unlike guardsmen or skittery, they rarely face the enemy directly, yet they spend their lives entombed in iron, never setting foot on soil again. They trade the quick death of the battlefield for the slow death within a ship's steel belly. A smaller number are pressed into the Adeptus Arbites, the Imperium's interplanetary enforcers. To join them is to gain weapons and authority, but also to be trapped in rigid doctrine. Unlike guardsmen, Arbites are less likely to die meaningless deaths, but they become something else. Instruments of oppression, estranged from the very people they once belonged to. Taken together, the fate of civilians in these forces shares one truth: they cease to be themselves. Whether as exalted Astartes, hollow skittery, enslaved navy crews, or hardened Arbites, all are reduced to cogs in the vast machine of the Imperium. Compared to the Guard or PDF, these paths may offer a higher chance of survival, but the price is always freedom and humanity. Once a civilian passes through these gates, they can never again be called ordinary. They are consumed by eternal war, and that is the destiny the Imperium has written for them. When people speak of the powers that sustain the Imperium, their thoughts almost always turn to the armies, the endless hosts of the Astra Militarum, or the colossal fleets of the Imperial Navy that stretch across the stars. Yet there is something that binds the Imperium together more closely than steel, more intimately than weapons of war. That force is faith. In the Imperium, faith is not simply a comfort for the weary or a ritual for the devout. It is the chain that binds humanity to its great and merciless empire, the bond that ensures that even in the depths of despair, men and women fall to their knees and cry out the Emperor's holy name. The ones who nurture, direct, and exploit this devotion are the ecclesiarchy, the great church of the Emperor. The ecclesiarchy is everywhere, its presence inescapable. On shrine worlds, cathedrals blaze with candlelight, hymns echo without pause, and oceans of pilgrims flow endlessly through streets paved with devotion. On hive worlds, suffocating with smoke and teeming with billions, each labor district has its small chapel, where workers enter before their shift and stumble back after, their hands blistered, their backs bent, their words rising in prayer. On the distant edges of the Imperium, on desolate frontier worlds where settlements are sparse, the church is often the only building of stone, a fortress of faith rising above shacks of wood and scrap, a symbol of sacred power greater than any local ruler could dream to wield. No matter where one is born, whether in a glittering spire, a choking factory block, or a lonely settlement beneath alien stars, sooner or later they learn the basic prayers, and with trembling hands they trace the holy sign across their chest. For the ordinary citizen, life is inseparable from ritual, as though existence itself is measured by the rhythm of devotion. At birth, a child is offered to the emperor, perhaps with little more than a few whispered lines from a traveling priest, spoken in haste before moving on to the next settlement. When they come of age, they undergo rites of baptism surrounded by candles, smothered in incense, and sometimes marked by blood. Every day of toil begins with prayers to the emperor, and every night ends with the tolling of bells from the nearest chapel. Faith is not a matter of choice, it is obligation, carved into daily life as surely as hunger or labor. To lack devotion is to invite suspicion, and the whispered word heretic spreads faster than any plague. This grip is tightened by the doctrines drilled into every mind. Children are raised with the certainty that the emperor is the one true living God, humanity's only salvation, and that all who differ, all who doubt are enemies. The stories told to them are not lessons to be debated, but truths repeated until they sink into the soul. The emperor sacrificed in the war against Horus, the saints who gave their lives for faith, the worlds annihilated for turning away from devotion. For the common folk, history is not inquiry, it is scripture. There exists only what the church approves, and nothing beyond its sanction. Behind its sacred facade, the ecclesiarchy is also a vast engine of power. It extracts the tithe of faith, levies of grain, or oil, and goods, draining worlds to maintain its cathedrals, sustain its clergy, and fuel the endless pilgrimages that span the stars. On shrine worlds, billions of pilgrims flow like rivers of flesh, selling homes, tools, and heirlooms for the chance to set foot on holy ground. For the faithful, it is honor. For countless families, it is ruin. Some fall into poverty simply to pay the tithe, while their children wither away in dark mines. And yet, none dare to complain. For complaint is heresy, and heresy is death. Among the most powerful instruments of the ecclesiarchy are the rites performed in great gatherings. Hymns thunder across vast plazas, entire populations kneel as one, their voices rising in a tide of sound that seems to shake the sky. That force of spirit offers comfort, reminding the people that they are not alone. Yet it also binds them into a single body, a mass that can be guided, manipulated, controlled. In moments of chaos, when fear begins to spread like fire, the sound of hymns alone can silence panic, draw every gaze upward, and make them believe the emperor's eyes are upon them. But the same ritual that consoles also enslaves, fusing gratitude with helplessness until the two are indistinguishable. Not all, of course, believe so, as at least some harbor quiet doubts in the privacy of their thoughts. Does the emperor truly hear me? Does he know my voice? But such questions are rarely spoken aloud. For the redemptionists, the zealots who burn heretics without hesitation, walk every street and haunt every gathering. In the Imperium, the fear of being branded heretic is deeper than the fear of death. To die of sickness or hunger is meaningless. To die by purge is to at least have one's soul cleansed. What terrifies and inspires awe in equal measure are the miracles tied to devotion. On rare occasions, living saints appear, their presence blazing like fire, their lives testimony that the emperor does indeed hear his people. Such moments ignite hope and draw countless millions into renewed faith. Yet they also tighten the chains. For if miracles are true, then so too must be judgment. The hand that blesses can also strike. In the end, the ecclesiarchy is not merely religion, it is one of the pillars that holds the Imperium together. It gives the common folk a reason to endure what no human should be asked to bear. In the poisoned depths of the hives, in the face of beasts from the void, even as their children are taken to the meat grinder of war, they whisper to themselves, all for the emperor, that faith is the strength that lets trillions carry on. Yet it is also the shackle that ensures they will never escape the cycle of obedience and pain. Where the ecclesiarchy reveals itself in blazing cathedrals and thunderous processions, the Inquisition moves in silence. No grand rituals, no public ceremonies. It walks unseen, but its shadow falls over every life, and its silence is heavier than iron for the common people. The Inquisition is both shield and blade, protection against the enemies of mankind, yet also the knife forever at their throat. Their hidden presence ensures that no citizen ever feels safe. A careless word, a glance held too long, an heirloom from forgotten times, any of these may be reason enough to summon suspicion. Few have ever seen an inquisitor with their own eyes, yet stories of them flow like whispered curses. Villages burned in a single night, cults erased without trace, whole worlds condemned to death over a mere suspicion. Purge, a word every citizen knows, a word that needs no explanation. When an inquisitor declares a community tainted by heresy, mutation, or Xenos influence, the sentence is carried out without pause. For the people, this can mean sudden death, without warning, without trial. Families burned alive within their own churches. Executions in the open square, watched in silence by neighbors too afraid to breathe. Whole districts vanishing overnight, names struck from every record. The terror lies not only in the violence itself, but in its arbitrariness. There are no clear lines, no true safety, only the dreadful knowledge that anyone, at any time, may be next. And so, ordinary people learn to live in silence, wrapping themselves in caution. They share little of their hearts, not even with family. Prayer becomes both declaration of loyalty and shield against fear. To question is rebellion, and rebellion is death. Trust erodes, replaced by suspicion. Every glance between neighbors carries weight. Every word might be the last spoken in freedom. The three great ordos of the Inquisition deepen this suffocating grip. Ordo Hereticus, hunting heretics, witches, and traitors from within. To the common folk, this is the most immediate terror. A vague accusation, a whispered denunciation, can drag them into dungeons of fire and iron. Ordo Dormadeus, fighting the demons of chaos. When they arrive, it signals that catastrophe is already at hand. Mass exorcisms sweep entire cities. Purges by flame leave fields of ash. Thousands of innocents destroyed in the desperate hope that a single demon finds no refuge. Ordo Xenos, waging their endless war against alien species and those accused of consorting with them. On the fringes of imperial space, whole settlements vanish in the cleansing campaigns of the Inquisition. The ecclesiarchy builds faith through ritual and symbol. The Inquisition spreads fear through silence and uncertainty. The people worship the god Emperor because they are taught that they must. But they fear the Inquisition because they know its shadow strikes faster than any bullet. One hand leads in the open light. The other waits in the darkness, ready to kill. For the common folk, the Inquisition is never far away. Its unseen hand weighs on every choice. Should they keep a family heirloom, or destroy it for safety? Should they trust a neighbor, or report them for a strange word? Should they turn away from what they saw, or confess it and hope to be spared? In such a world, survival comes not through faith, but through invisibility, by blending into the crowd, by never standing out, by leaving no trace. And so, in the Imperium, the military makes citizens into tools of war. The ecclesiarchy molds them into obedient flock. The Inquisition shapes them into fearful shadows, never daring to lift their voices. Faith and fear march together, the two jaws of iron that close upon every soul in the galaxy-spanning empire of mankind. And from here we step into Part 5, where the mask of the Imperium falls away and its true face is revealed. Endless wars, merciless exterminations, and the brutal choices forced upon those who only wished to live, yet were caught in the devouring machinery of empire. If the previous parts painted the Imperium as a vast and relentless machine where faith and fear intertwined to maintain a fragile stability, then here we see its darkest underside, the shadow that every common soul must face in each fleeting moment of survival. For them, the Imperium is no paradise of salvation, but rather a colossal empire that grinds human lives beneath the endless wheels of war. Within the Imperium, ordinary citizens are never allowed the luxury of feeling safe, even when they are spared from the horrors that descend from beyond the stars. The weight of fear within their own society presses down upon every breath they take. A simple farmer on an agri-world might be hanged for failing to recite a prayer in the correct cadence. A miner may vanish overnight, accused of heresy on the flimsiest of grounds, perhaps nothing more than a strange birthmark upon his skin. In a world where denunciation carries more weight than truth itself, survival demands silence, bowed heads, and the burial of one's true self. Records speak of a small chapel where a young girl stumbled upon a single verse during prayer. For one misplaced line, the entire community of 300 was declared tainted with heresy. The ecclesiarchy decreed that the village be burned to ash. For the Imperium, fear is not a side effect, it is the very instrument of governance. War, too, is the lifeblood of the Imperium. And for the common folk, war is not some distant spectacle fought in the void, but a presence that all too often comes knocking at their own doors. Picture an agri-world. In the morning, farmers till the fields under golden sunlight. By afternoon, a commissar arrives to declare all harvests seized for the military. The able-bodied men are conscripted, dragged away for training, while women and children struggle to maintain the crops, knowing that the grain they sow will not feed their families, but armies destined for foreign wars. And in many grim cases, the people do not merely sustain war, they become its fuel. When an orc horde descends upon a vulnerable world and the PDF proves too feeble to stand, civilians are herded into militias, handed lasguns they have never seen before, and cast into battle as little more than living shields. They are not considered soldiers, they are simply flesh, thrown into the fire to bide time for others. In the lexicon of the Imperium, sacrifice is a word of boundless cruelty. Exterminatus, the order to obliterate an entire world, stands as the ultimate testament. Take, for instance, the fate of Sarin. When Inquisitor Eisenhorn uncovered the threat of heresy festering there, the solution was not to root out the guilty one by one, but to immolate the entire planet. Billions of innocents perished in the inferno, condemned not for crimes committed but for the mere possibility of corruption. No one asked their names, no one recorded their stories. In the chronicles of the Imperium, Cyrene was reduced to a single detached line, cleansed by fire. Elsewhere, some worlds have been marked as nothing more than blood tributes. When the Tyranids descend and reinforcements cannot arrive in time, the Imperium accepts that the planet will be devoured, sacrificing its entire populace to delay the enemy for a few precious weeks, enough time for a fleet to regroup. Strategically, one world lost may preserve dozens more, but for those left behind they are reduced to nothing but statistics in a ledger of cold arithmetic. Pressed into corners with no escape, civilians are forced into choices that rarely lead to salvation. Some embrace fanatic piety, reciting prayers with obsessive fervor, scourging themselves daily to prove devotion until their humanity erodes, leaving only blind zealots behind. Others vanish into silence, living like ghosts within their own communities, refusing to speak, refusing to gather, hoping that the Imperium's gaze will pass over them unnoticed. Yet others, abandoned for too long, turn to the forbidden in search of a sliver of hope. To the Imperium, such acts are betrayal, but to those who make them, they are simply the last means of survival. On one frontier world, as the Tyranids approached, the people cried out for imperial salvation. None came. Instead of waiting for annihilation, some communities accepted the promises of a chaos sorcerer. Follow me, and you shall be spared. And indeed they were delivered from the Tyranid jaws only to awaken as thralls of chaos. When the Imperium returned, they were not seen as victims of abandonment, but as heretics to be purged without mercy. In truth, the civilians of the Imperium do not truly live, they merely endure. Their lives are brief, smothered in fear, and nearly devoid of hope. Each day is a test of loyalty. Today you breathe, tomorrow you may vanish. And yet, within their endurance lies a bitter paradox. It is not the might of armies nor the power of lords that sustains the Imperium, but the sheer resilience of the oppressed masses. They continue, not because they love the Imperium, but because there is no other choice. And in that despair, they stand as the clearest testament to the harsh reality of the 41st millennium. A galaxy where even the act of surviving, in itself, is nothing short of a miracle. Looking back at the journey we've just taken from the back-breaking lives of civilians in towering Hive cities, to the brutal grind of military service, to the ever-present shadow of faith in the Inquisition, we can see a single unifying picture. The Imperium is both vast and grim, a place where humanity exists more than it truly lives, and survival itself is little more than a fragile gamble in an endless war. The Imperium calls itself the last fortress of mankind, and in truth, when one looks out into a galaxy swarming with monsters, heresy and demonic powers, that claim does not seem entirely false. Yet when we peer deeper into its hidden corners, a cruel paradox emerges. This so-called last hope is built upon layer after layer of suffering, fear, and ceaseless sacrifice from the very people it claims to protect. An ordinary civilian, born into the Imperium, has almost no choice but to obey, to believe, and to hope that tomorrow they will still draw breath. In that light, the daily lives of common folk reveal the Imperium's true nature more than any grand battle or glorious proclamation. It is found instead in meager meals, in the endless shifts within suffocating minds, in the constant drone of ecclesiarchy sermons warning of sin, and in the wary glances cast to avoid the gaze of the Inquisition. This is the true heartbeat of the Imperium, a rhythm that never stops, yet always trembles with fear. What makes the Imperium both terrifying and tragic is the coexistence of two forces that seem utterly opposed: faith and fear. Faith in the Emperor, worshipped as an immortal god, the sole light within the cosmic dark. Fear of war, of heresy, of the alien, and above all, of the Imperium itself, where a single misspoken word may mean death. Civilians live caught between these extremes. They pray to the Emperor for salvation, even as they shudder at news of an inquisitor purging an entire district over a whisper of heresy. They send their children to the guard with pride, while knowing it is a death sentence, dressed in honor. They listen to preachers exalt sacrifice, yet quietly wonder, will these sacrifices ever truly matter, or will they vanish into the endless spiral of war? In truth, the Imperium endures not because of the triumphs of space marines or the might of titans, but because of its countless nameless citizens. They are the foundation, the laborers forging ammunition, the farmers feeding armies, the workers who keep Hive cities alive, the faithful who light candles in endless chapels. Without them, the Imperium would collapse in an instant, and yet they are the most forgotten, reduced to numbers more than remembered as people. Seen from this angle, civilian life reflects the Imperium's true essence, a vast, cold machine running on the blood and bones of the tiny cogs within it. Civilians know they are grains of sand, yet also know that without those grains, the desert itself would cease to exist. This is the Imperium's tragic paradoxy, its cruelty matched only by its grim majesty. And so we return to the great question: why do people go on? Why endure life under the Imperium? Perhaps the answer lies in those same two extremes. Faith, fragile though it may be, gives them reason to endure. Feel merciless though it is, forces them forward. It is the union of hope and despair that forges the resilience of humanity in Warhammer 40,000, and that allows the Imperium to endure for millennia against every enemy. If we step back, the Imperium can be seen as a flickering lantern in a raging storm. It lights the way for humanity, but to keep burning, it must consume endless fuel made of billions of ordinary lives, cruel, merciless, yet the only way the Imperium can stand against an unforgiving galaxy. Most stories of Warhammer 40,000 linger on the spectacle. Space Marines clashing with Xenos, Titans crushing enemies beneath their steps, Inquisitors shattering heretical cults. Yet those are only the surface. Behind every victory is the silhouette of the nameless, the worker who fashions shell casings, the farmer sowing poisoned soil to feed the god, the youth who leaves home to fight and never returns. They, not the heroes, are the true pillars holding up the Imperium. In this sense, the greatness of the Imperium does not lie in its absolute might, but in its stubborn survival through endless tragedy. Each individual may be ground down within the machine, yet together they endure like a colossal organism devouring its own cells to stay alive. It is a horror, but also a testament to humanity's strange resilience. The more desperate the circumstance, the harder they cling to existence. Yet this endurance raises an unsettling question. Is the Imperium truly the last hope of mankind, or merely a sanctified form of collective slavery? On one side it is salvation from chaos, on the other it is a suffocating shadow crushing every soul. For the common citizen, that boundary is so thin it is almost invisible. When a believer kneels to pray, he finds peace but also tightens the chains upon himself. And in this way Warhammer 40,000 becomes more than fiction. It becomes a dark mirror of our own world. We, too, live within vast systems where the individual is powerless to escape the greater machinery. We, too, believe, sacrifice, and sometimes accept blindly, in the hope that the system will protect us. This is where Warhammer transcends fantasy and becomes a reflection of reality. Cinema often ends with resolution, a triumph, a disaster, or an awakening. But with the Imperium there is no ending, only the cycle: war, sacrifice, survival, and war again. Its only conclusion will come when the last light gutters out, or when humanity finds another path. Something the grim darkness of the 41st millennium seems never to allow. It is this endless